Everyone, welcome to Conversations with Local and Indie Authors. This year's annual Indie Author Day is November 3rd and 4th, but we are celebrating all week. Indie Author Day is a special event for libraries and its readers because it allows us to meet and celebrate achievements of our local and indie writers. In case you don't know, an indie author is someone who self-publishes to reach as many readers as possible to grow a profitable author publishing business. Today, we have a wonderful panel of authors to share their experiences as writers. I would like to introduce Henry Brinton, Jerry Markowitz, Lena Bhatnagar, Mita Malby, Cassie Sahursky, and Edward Belper. Welcome and thank you all for being here. Let us begin. Would you like to start? Please tell us a little about yourself.
Very happy to be here tonight on this panel. Always good to be with fellow authors. I have been living in Northern Virginia for about 30 years now, but my roots in this area are even deeper. I grew up in Bowie, Maryland, went to college in North Carolina, Duke University, and then to Yale Divinity School in Connecticut before starting my ministry in the Presbyterian Church. So I've been a pastor now for over 30 years, mostly in Alexandria and in Fairfax. But when my wife and I got to the point where our children had grown up and flown the nest, we decided to move to the town of Occoquan. And so since 2016, we have been residents of this very historic riverfront town right on the border between Prince William and Fairfax County. And my residency in the town has inspired me to write a series of small town mystery novels. The town itself has been a tremendous inspiration with its very rich history going back to 1734 and tremendous racial and cultural diversity in the town today, which makes it a very exciting place to be and a very rich setting for mystery novels. So I've been pleased to be able to write and have published 2 books so far: City of Peace, which was published in 2019, and Windows of the Heavens, published in 2021. I'll be talking about Windows of the Heavens this evening.
Jerry, I pass it on to you.
Thank you, Rabinda, and thank you to Fairfax County for supporting local and indie authors. And I'm happy to be with the panel tonight and with everyone attending. And I've been in the area also several decades. I was working for the government for over 30 years, managing technical training and writing articles for professional journals. And since I retired, I've been writing more and more poetry, teaching at OLLI, George Mason University's Lifelong Learning Institute, still finding time for exercising and going to the gym, and I have several books already published and actually available for borrowing from the Fairfax County Library. And I'll be talking, reading some excerpts about one of my first books, Poems That Rhyme Most of the Time. And maybe if there's time, I might read 1 or 2 poems from my second book, Exploring Kindness and Respect. And again, thank you for the opportunity for us sharing with each other and with the audience.
Jerry, over to you, Lena.
Thanks, Rabinder. Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Bhatnagar, and I'm an economist and a writer. I'm originally from Massachusetts and studied outside of the area. I studied economics at Columbia and finance, mathematics, and French from NYU, but I've been happily living in Northern Virginia for about a decade. I came here for work, and by day, I spend my time as an economist for the US Treasury Department. I spend my weekends volunteering with the Smithsonian at the National Museum of American History. But by night, I don't turn into a pumpkin. I turn into a troll, essentially, because I pull out the laptop and become a writer. And I'll be talking tonight about The Tea Merchant, which is my debut published novel. And it's a very timely time to have this conversation today. My novel focuses on the Boston Tea Party, pulling in my Massachusetts roots. And the Boston Tea Party will mark its 250th anniversary next month. So I've been spending the past several weeks talking about the global links in the Boston Tea Party. I love learning about different cultures and connecting the dots across history. So my love of writing is heavily influenced by my love of travel. And hopefully you'll see a bit of that in my book if you pick it up, which is also available at the Fairfax County Library.
Thank you, Lena. Over to you, Maida.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for having me here, Ravinder. My name is Maida Malby. I'm originally from the Philippines. I'm a military spouse, and this is our second time to be assigned here in Northern Virginia. So we've been all over the US and also overseas for assignments with the US Air Force. I am an author of romance, destination romance novels, multicultural, and contemporary. I call them destination romance because they're set all over the world. And like Lena, I also love travel. So that's why I set my books everywhere in the world, because I believe that people fall in love everywhere and with anybody that they're fated to meet and fall in love with. I'm going to be reading from my Christmas anthology, my holiday anthology, the story in my Christmas anthology called Pasko Na My Love, which is also available in the Fairfax County Library.
Thank you. We'd love to hear some more. Over to you, Cassie.
Thank you, Ravinder. So my name is Kazi Zahersky. Good evening, everyone. And I am a children's book author and illustrator. And echoing Lena and Maida, I too love to travel. I actually am the daughter of an anthropologist, well, now retired anthropologist. So in my formative years, I traveled a great deal, living in various countries, Thailand, France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, you name it. In my later years, I settled my later elementary and high school years and college, I settled here. So I'm a true native to Northern Virginia. I was in Burke. I'm now in Annandale. But as a child and growing up, I was always taking creative writing classes. I was always in art classes, art history, editor for yearbook, stuff like that. But then in college, I decided to try to exercise the left hemisphere of my brain, and I went into biotech, and I got a dual major in biotechnology and computer science, and it was fine. I didn't love it, and then I 5 days after college moved to California, where I started working at a biotechnology company, and somehow in the midst of it, I got drawn into the arts again, but this time the entertainment, in the entertainment industry. So I was both in front of the camera as well as behind the camera doing some script writing. And my friends started having children, and I wanted to come up with unique gifts for them. So I started writing stories for them that were tailored to them. And as I was doing this, friends were suggesting that I do this for the general public and for more of the young audience to enjoy. So here I am writing children's books and illustrating them. And I have now published 7 of them that I've written and illustrated. And today I will be reading an excerpt from one of my books, which is soon to be a series called Perspective Detective, which is right behind me. It's a optical illusion filled mystery that's interactive, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you. I'm so glad you made the jump. We get a chance to hear all about your writings now.
Thank you.
Edward, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rabinder. I'm Edward Belfar, and I've also been living in this area for quite a while, over 30 years, but I'm originally from New York City and Long Island. It's where I grew up. And I have written two books, two books I've had published. One is a collection of short stories called Wanderers. And the second one, which I'll be reading a little excerpt from tonight, is a novel that was recently published in this past June by a publisher called Flexible Press. And I also, well, I enjoy traveling, as other people have mentioned here. My wife is from Kenya. I met her here in this area, but have had the opportunity to visit there with her several times, and some of the stories in my collection, Wanderers, are set in Kenya. And other than that, I taught some at the college level, and I worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture for over 21 years as a regulatory analyst, which was a very different kind of writing than creative writing. I was basically drafting regulations, and I retired from that at the end of last year. And again, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for having us, Rabinder.
Edward, thank you all for sharing your background with us. And now I'd invite Henry, if you would start with something about your books. Henry, you're muted.
Thank you. Both my books are set in the town of Occoquan, and they deal with the relationships between people in the town. Most small town mysteries are very caught up in the relationships between people as they face a challenge together. The main character in both of my books is a pastor named Harley Camden. No surprise there, since I'm a pastor and can speak about some of the tensions and also the opportunities that come out of congregational life. And in my first book, City of Peace, the threat to the town of Occoquan is a terrorist threat. And Harley and his community have to respond in a way that brings people together and helps them to both solve the mystery of the murder of a young Muslim girl and also ward off a terrorist threat. So that is the heart of City of Peace. But the book I'm talking about tonight is Windows of the Heavens, the second book. And in this case, the threat to the town of Occoquan is an environmental threat. River towns are particularly susceptible to climate change and other environmental disruptions. And no surprise that in this case, the threat to the town is a devastating flood. And the mystery at the heart of the book is what caused the flood? What caused the devastation to this town? And what caused the death of a young man whose body is found in the debris from the flood? So as a way into this book, I'll read to you a short passage from the night that the rain begins to fall on Pastor Harley Camden and the residents of the town of Occoquan. Rain pounded on the roof of Harley's house, banged on the windows, and rattled down the gutters all through the night. Union Street, which runs from Commerce down to Mill Street, had become a river. A torrent of black water, several feet deep, was running toward the Occoquan River, swelling, rolling, and ripping merchandise from the porches of shops along the street. Harley thought he heard a train. but then realized that the sound was being made by the water as it roared through town, even causing parked cars to rise up, spin around, and crash into buildings. Logs and large branches were being carried downhill, along with lawn chairs and pieces of fencing. And while some of the debris spilled left and right onto Mill Street, most of it flowed directly into the Occoquan River. In the glow of the streetlights, he could see that the gravel parking lot that stood between Mill Street and the river was now submerged. It had become a muddy delta, linking the two rising, churning bodies of water. Up the hill were two police officers on Commerce Street trying to set up barricades in the pouring rain, but the sawhorses they tried to put in place were immediately swept away. Harley was breathing quickly, frightened by what he was seeing, but also awestruck, witnessing a force that could destroy anything in its path. A line from the book of Genesis came to mind. The waters swelled so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. So that begins the devastation, and the story plays out as Harley and his members of his church and fellow citizens try to figure out what has caused this enormous devastation.
Thank you, Henry. Sounds fascinating. May I invite you, Cassie, to go next? You have to unmute, Cassie.
Sorry about that. Yes, as I mentioned, I'm a children's book author and illustrator. So my books, as you can see, I have some behind me, are these books back here. And I will discuss, I have a series called the Barnaby series. So it's Barnaby Believes in Himself and Barnaby Gets a B. And it is a series about a tiny little bee with a big and overactive imagination that gets the better of him in a classroom environment. Because I know there are a lot of struggles and anxieties that children experience in the classroom, and there are stories that can help children. There are gentle lessons that can be told through stories, and that's what I like to do, is not only entertain children, but tell gentle lessons through my stories. And I hope that my stories, and when I write them, will elicit some sort of emotion, either laughter, crying, and everything in between. So it is each story he struggles with some sort of anxiety in the classroom. In this one, he struggles with stage fright, and there are coping mechanisms and calming techniques, and each story is filled with bee puns, so there's humor. And then this one, he struggles with perfectionism and learns important lessons like asking for help from your teacher, and learning that trying your best is enough, and other things that perfectionists deal with. And then Perspective Detective, which I will be reading the little excerpt from, is soon to be a series because I'm just finishing up the illustrations for the second book now. It is a interactive mystery. It is filled with optical illusions, and it's filled with visual puzzles, which is what makes it interactive. And it teaches children the very large concept of perspective in a simplified manner. So it shows that any given situation has more than one way of looking at it. So as you saw, as the child who's reading the book, or the adult reading with them, solves the mystery, the children can participate and solve the mystery as well, and use the visual puzzles. And they might see a grandfather, but when they switch it, it's a grandmother. So it's meant to be entertaining in that way. And since it's a children's book, I'll just start with the first few pages. Let's see. And it's written in rhyme in a Dr. Seuss-esque sort of manner. Perspective Detective here. How do you do? I've come to teach you all a thing, maybe two. When things don't go your way and life seems unfair, the secret of life is to never compare. And then there's sort of like illustrations that are optical illusionish, and this one shows that in each panel that a bear wants something the other one has, and it goes full circle. You'll never control all the things life brings, but you can control how you look at these things. So find a new angle, a new point of view. a change of perspectives to what you need to do. Oh, my daughter just walked in. Like these two, you see, why they argue all day when what they could do is make up and go play. First, we've got Axel, a well-behaved boy. Then Lexa comes over and grabs up his toy. It's all Axel's fault because he took my toy bear. But Axel insists, no, I didn't, I swear. And then this is where you'll be prompted to figure out clues in the optical illusion. So these might, I don't know how you can see it, if you can see it on the screen, but what might look like blocks. If you adjust your eyes, you'll have the first clue. You might be able to figure out the first clue. Can you guys see it? It's a clue, and there's a hidden message. I don't know if you can see it. Where ISTEDDY. So there's a bunch of visual puzzles and all of that throughout with this rhyming story that teaches the big concept of perspective in a simplified manner. So is this a D or is it a P? It's all about how you look at it. There's more than one way of looking at things. So yeah, this is, and there's a big surprise ending. And is it 3 pieces or is it 4? So I'm sort of showing you the visuals, but yeah, that's kind of my being an author and illustrator. My illustrations go very hand in hand with my writing. So there's also a second one coming up very soon as I'm finishing up the illustrations for that.
Thank you, Cassie. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Edward, may I invite you to tell us about your books?
Sure, thank you.
Sorry, my daughter just came in. So what was that?
Sure. My book is called, my novel is called The Very Innocent Man. And it's a satirical novel about a doctor who wants to become a celebrity, wants to become a famous TV doctor. And he thinks that the best way to go about that is to become an anti-drug crusader. So he goes on TV, makes some TV appearances, and he criticizes his fellow doctors for over-prescribing opioids and contributing to the opioid epidemic that way. But meanwhile, he's also selling opioid prescriptions for cash himself. And so that eventually lands him in some trouble. And he gets arrested, and then he tries to subsequently to reinvent himself as a kind of motivational speaker, life coach, and so on. So in this brief excerpt I'm going to read is, well, it's where the title of the book comes from, actually. And this comes after his arrest. He's coming out of the courthouse and he runs into a reporter and she questions him. He's been arrested by the FBI for drug trafficking. His misdeeds have caught up with him. Okay. At the bottom of the steps, an attractive young red-haired reporter, accompanied by a camera crew, stood in wait. The microphone that the reporter thrust in Dr. Rosen's face bore the red, white, and blue logo of the local Fox affiliate, Fox 5. Dr. Rosen, you've gone on TV to criticize other doctors for prescribing opiates. You've called them drug dealers. How does it feel to be arrested by the FBI and charged in federal court with illegally distributing a controlled substance? Dr. Rosen gave a start and threw up his hands to shield his face from the camera. His appearance at that moment embarrassed him as much as his fallen status from doctor and TV personality to accused felon. Could the camera crew not have allowed him even a moment to make himself presentable? He had no makeup artist to hide the bulges under his eyes or to give him a thicker head of hair as he had in the Chicago studio. He wore the same rumpled trousers and white shirt, now with yellow stains under the armpits, as he had the day before. The FBI raiding crew had allowed him precisely 2 minutes to throw them on before dragging him off to jail. Pat, that's his lawyer, who would normally have placed his bulky body between client and reporter in such a situation, instead sidestepped his way out of camera range, showing surprising agility for a big man. What about the charges? Is it true that what they're saying about you? Dr. Rosen, letting his arms drop to his sides, glared into the camera. Of course not. It's all made up. Lies and slander. It's a total setup. A witch hunt. I'm innocent. I'm very innocent. Hey, Doc, Pat chortled. You're famous. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Over to you, Mida.
Thank you. So I'm reading from my holiday anthology, Pasko na My Love. So this anthology is a collaboration among 6 Filipino American romance authors. So I initiated this collaboration because of of our collective desire to promote each other, and also to share about Filipino joy, and represent Filipino American in popular publication. Because when I started writing in 2016, I didn't know anybody who has Filipino Americans as main characters in their romance stories. And so that's why I started writing them myself, because, like Toni Morrison said, if there's a book that you haven't read that you want to read, I'm paraphrasing, but poorly, you must write it yourself. And so that's what I did. I wrote actually during the National Novel Writing Month with Boracay Vows, and I won. And from then on, I started writing and joining every year, which is today, actually starts today. And so I haven't put in my 1,667 words, which I'm going to do after this, hopefully. So this story revolves around the grandmother who's celebrating her 100th birthday, because the concept, well, the lola, the grandmother in the Filipino culture, she's very important. She plays a very important role in the Filipino culture. It's practically a matriarchal society. And even in the popular media these days, the lola has been um, given recognition in Spider-Man, in Disney commercial. I don't know if you've seen a couple of years ago, the Disney Christmas ad is revolves around the Filipino grandmother who migrated to the US, and many others in popular culture. So this is a scene discussing the party that they're going to have for her 100th birthday. Um, this is a conversation between the main characters in my short story, and one of the secondary characters. Um, it's going to be so much fun. Carlo punctuated his enthusiasm with a clap. Our first family reunion in a decade. How's the party planning coming along? We're still waiting for more parole to be delivered, but it's going well, she said. Lola wanted all the windows and doors of the hacienda decorated with the colorful star-shaped lanterns. I've delegated as much as I can to the other cousins and to the Hacienda Luz staff. Eden has ordered everything, and Nora will handle them when they arrive, so I can concentrate on Lola on the day itself. I'll help you with her, Rafa volunteered. That is, if I'm still invited. It looks like a family-only event. Of course you are invited, along with 400 people who have close connection with Lola Nati, Vida assured him. Her grandmother had touched thousands of lives in her century of life. She and Granda Robert had helped immigrants settle in the country legally by hiring them to work in the hotel and vineyard, and sponsoring their petition for permanent residence. You're more of a family to Lola than some of our blood relatives, she added. Like Tito Oli, Carlos said, the family playboy, he's a bit of a flake, he told the puzzled Rafa. Oliver's ghosting me, so I haven't included him on the guest list yet. Serves him right if he shows up next Saturday and the hotel security doesn't let him in. Ooh, I like it when you play Contra Vida, Carlos snickered. Against life? Rafa asked, which was the literal translation of the Spanish words. No, in Filipino it means anti-hero, Vida said. A villain? You can never be that. You're the kindest, most generous person I know, Rafa said. So I'm not gonna make up a good audiobook narrator, so I'm going to hire somebody to do that for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry, please share with us your story. Unmute Jerry, please.
Thank you, Rabinda. Again, I'm Jerry Markowitz, and I've written 2 books, and my current book is Exploring Kindness and Respect. But today I'm going to read excerpts from my previous book, Poems That Rhyme Most of the Time. And I wrote the book before and during the pandemic, and the purpose was really to offer readers another way to smile on a variety of topics. And the poems are short, easily readable, lighthearted. And I wanted to volunteer and read the poems to patients in hospitals and assisted living. And the pandemic put a temporary halt on that, but I did get to read some of the poems via Zoom, and I did donate a copy of the book to a recent fundraiser for breast cancer education, screening, and treatment. But without saying any more about the books, I'll share a few of my short poems. Excuse me. So here we go. The first poem I call Rain. Heavy rain outside the train. Inside, everything's dry, but we want to cry because the train stopped in the rain, waiting to move. Driver can't see while the rain pours from the sky. We're still staying dry and saying goodbye to arriving on time, 9:30. Another subject I chose, again, a little shorter, I call cookies. 3 different cookies left on a plate. We could eat them now or just wait. Whatever we do, they'll be gone soon, and we'll need more from the nearby store, and this time we'll buy many, many more. And the third poem I call Flew. Willie and Millie flew from the sky, landing nearby on a tree. On that tree is a bee, so Willie and Millie quickly flee. And the bee is buzzing with glee, because it found its own special tree. And the fourth poem is a short think-along poem that I call Free. Let's see what's free. Watching beautiful leaves on trees, enjoying a pleasant breeze, seeing the sun in the sky, watching birds fly by. Helping a child read, seeing a smile, at least for a while, on a child's face who completed a hard race. And the next poem I call Hill. Regardless of this morning's chill, we still have the will and want the thrill to climb that steep hill. At the top of the hill, we can see all around, including down to the ground. We can sit and gaze and amaze at the land, then stand and run down the hill, ready for another thrill. And And the last two short poems, the first I call Winter. Got the notion to put some lotion on these dry, chapped hands, caused by the bold, cold weather that comes every year for all to bear. Yet in a blink, spring is here, winter was there. And the last poem, a little shorter, I call Washing. We chose some clothes to wash today and leave others for another day. We're waiting for another day because the soap we use is no more until we go to the grocery store. Okay, thank you.
Terry. Got a smile to everyone's face. Over to you, Lena. Please share your books with us.
Thank you. And I only have one book, so that makes it pretty easy. And I'll be sharing The Tea Merchant. And it looks like I'm in mirror form, so a little bit of perception activity for you here. You can see the real thing at the library. But a little bit of context. So The Tea Merchant, it's a historical fiction novel. It's set in 1773 Boston, leading up to and through the Boston Tea Party. It tells the story from the point of view of Constance Pruitt. She's a young widow from a prominent and loyalist Boston family, meaning they're on the side of the king. And she has luckily just inherited her late husband's tea shop, unluckily for him. So her family would rather see her give it all up and remarry, but she's enjoying her newfound independence. But unfortunately for her, at the same time, the British East India Company in London gets a monopoly on selling tea to the colonies. And when her business isn't selected for a contract, her business really begins to suffer. And rather than give up, she just decides to supplement her income, and she becomes a smuggler for John Hancock and the Sons of Liberty. Making her timing even worse, the company sends a couple of officers from India to Boston to complete the deals and to stamp out smuggling, so kind of 2 marks against her there. But as she's interacting with them, trying to find a way to get a deal, she actually uncovers a new and hidden threat that they bring from Bengal. And she'd have to work with her closest friends in the Daughters of Liberty to thwart the company. And before I read the excerpt, which will just be the beginning, first couple of pages, I did want to share that the idea came to me as a result of traveling to India. I was in Calcutta, and it was kind of the first moment where I made a connection between American history and Indian history. In my entire life, I've been studying American history, never really saw myself in it until I was in Calcutta, where they have this massive memorial to Queen Victoria. And lo and behold, inside is a statue of Robert Clive, who was the head of the East India Company, kind of a terrible but brilliant leader at the time. And I made that link. So this book does have a lot of links between East and West, but there's also a lot more that's happening here. It was a revolutionary time for a lot of different reasons. So this book and in this excerpt, it'll focus more on what's going on with women's rights and their roles in history, including through the Enlightenment period and its relation to philosophy that was also thriving at the time. So to begin, chapter 1, Boston, June 1773. The harbor was still quiet. The silhouette of Castle William at the edge of the shore remained dark, its ramparts undisturbed while His Majesty's officers housed there slept soundly. Along the low buildings that hugged the harbor, Constance Pruitt rushed silently through the shadowed lanes she had come to prefer these past few years. She cut across an alley and came upon Mrs. Fulton's home, where a tidy yard with an unmarked mailbox along the fence greeted her. Constance opened the lid and extracted a thin sheet as Mrs. Watling had instructed. Tightly scribbled across the page, Constance read, "The security of life, liberty, and property is essential for the preservation of mankind. Man's existence alone is too feeble to turn the pages of progress. One must also remember the ladies. As much as society has debated its contract amongst men, too little has been discussed of its obligations to those whose natural rights are forfeited naturally upon her birth. The custodians of liberty have imposed a tax on her kind, and a woman must choose to bear the cost to preserve her own fate or bill it to her keeper." Constance ignored the warning. She had no choice but to make her own way. She would have no keeper. She read to the bottom of the page and memorized the quotation at the end. The rumble of a carriage grew louder, and Constance hastily deposited the paper back into the mailbox and quickened her footsteps toward the harbor. She pulled a dark hood closer over her head, concealing her luminous brown hair tied back with a ribbon, and kept her head high, with her gray eyes fixed determinedly on the horizon. Her long legs overtook several redcoats who had groggily begun their morning rounds along the wharf. She pulled out a lace handkerchief to dab the back of her neck. She had never met John Hancock before. He was respected in her father's circle only as much as his wealth, which was significant, would confer. But she had never seen him at any of the intimate gatherings hosted by the Crown's closest allies. Hancock was known to be a strange man, of parts equally dandy and shrewd. Constance was unsure where his loyalties rested, but she suspected they lay closest to his purse. She understood how strong the tide of profit could be. Wasn't she now following its pull to meet one of the colony's wealthiest men in a secluded warehouse? She approached a nondescript building and pushed open the door to a dark room. And what happens in the room, you will have to see when you pick up the book. And back over to you, Rubinder.
For piquing our interest. So, Lena, since I have you here, let me ask you, you did touch upon it, but what was one of the most unexpected things or thing you learned while you were writing this book?
One of the most interesting things is that the characters will tell you who they want to be. I had a vision in my head of who some of these characters would be. One of the villains turned into a romantic interest. One of the romantic interests turned into a sibling. So obviously, I just had to let the characters tell me who they were. And so I had this grand plan. I was writing this book during the pandemic to get this out quickly. I wasn't doing anything else. But at the end of every chapter, I had to stop and listen to the voices that my characters spoke to me, essentially, and figured out where I would need to adjust my plan and see how I could change the next chapter. So it was a much slower process than I thought it would be, but it was actually much more fulfilling because it allowed me to really have time with the characters and give them the depth that they truly deserved.
Yeah. Meera, what would you add to that?
I'm also pantser. So like Lena said, when I started my first book, my debut, I meant it to be a standalone. But when I started writing and I was developing relationships and characters, they have family, they have friends. So I'm adding on to the characters in my current story, and I'm also planning for their stories in the future. So what has started as a standalone novel has become a series. And so it became about brothers, and then the love interests were friends from college, and so building up their backstories, and then them choosing who they're going to be falling for, having relationships with in the future. They just come to me as I write. So in the same way that they're dictating what's going to happen and where they're going to be set next. I didn't start to write as they're going to be set at a particular place. Like I set my first book in the Philippines because that's where I'm from, and as they always say, write what you know. And so this is a place that I was very knowledgeable about. I did have to do more research, but still, I was very intimate with the location and with the culture, and so all these things that I'm bringing into the story, I already know in my heart and in my mind. And so these are very intrinsic to me in sharing my culture. But then it started to become, and also my brand has started to develop through the years as I was writing all these stories, and it's become destination romance. And especially came to a head during the pandemic when it's very obvious that we need we need escape. And so my books have been um, you know um, geared towards having the readers travel in the comfort of their favorite reading nook, wherever they are. So they could go to Singapore, they could go to Thailand, they could go to the Philippines. And so it's a development through the years of what my um, theme is and what my brand is and what my stories are going to be as I'm writing them and in the future too.
Thank you. Edward, what would you like to add to that?
Well, there are a couple of things I learned, I think, in the course of writing a novel, because I had written mostly short stories before, and I'd made a couple of previous attempts at novel writing, but those novels were kind of episodic, and so I didn't maybe hold together very well. So I just had to learn, I think, to put together a narrative that would keep moving, and learn about pacing. And I got some help from readers along the way, and they just having people who are perceptive and interested in what you're doing, reading your work is a big help, certainly. And I just, between them and just doing it, I just picked up a much better sense of how to put together a novel-length narrative than I ever did before. A second thing, interesting thing about novel writing, a challenge I discovered, came at the editing stage, the later editing stage, after it was already accepted by a publisher, and I was working with the publisher on content edits, and then later even at the copy edit level, is that there's just so much more to think of in terms of a novel, in terms of in editing terms, in terms of the mechanics, to think of it as far as continuity and consistency and avoiding repetition. So I was doing a lot of word searches and going back and forth and trying to, discovering where I had used the same image twice and trying to eliminate things like that, or checking for, the seasons were consistent with what the characters were wearing, and the whole timing of the narrative. So there's a lot of work just at the final editing stage in getting out a book that I guess I wasn't fully aware of that, how challenging that part is, until I came to have to do it. So those were the two things that stuck out to me, I think.
Thank you. Cassie, what was your experience?
My experience in creating my children's picture books and creating the characters and the character development, and I tend to be very wordy, and I mean, one day I hope to actually write chapter books, children's chapter books, but I have to condense all of these character traits and the storyline into a very small 32-page story. So that was and is still my biggest challenge, having to come up with a elaborate, understandable, relatable story, but condensing it into something that's simplified and for children to be able to follow along to and catch without having to read so many words. So that's always been sort of my biggest challenge, because I can just write and write. I just have to figure out how to make it condensed. So I'd say that's my biggest challenge. And then as you can see, my other challenge is finding the time to write because I have young children who, I apologize, made their appearance. And so that's while writing and developing, but they also contribute to my inspiration. So my biggest challenge, I think, is like condensing the storylines that I formulate constantly in my head into a smaller, shorter book storyline.
I echo what Lena says, shorter is harder.
It is. It's definitely, I like to write it all out and then I have to suck it back all in.
Henry, what was unexpected for you?
I definitely resonate with what Lena and Maida were saying about how you discover that the characters take on a life of their own very quickly. In both of my novels, there is a mystery to be solved, and so I had a general story arc in mind about how I would get to the conclusion and how the mystery would be solved. But as I created these characters and they started interacting with each other, they quickly taught me that they were not going to go in the direction I wanted them to go. And so the entire process became much less me telling a story than interacting with these characters and figuring out together how we were going to get to the conclusion. And so that made it a lot more fun. It was not just an exercise in writing down something that I had dreamed up, but it really was a creative, interactive process with these characters who I guess are all some dimension of me or some dimension of people I know. But it made it a lot more fun, a lot more unpredictable, and something that really got me to a place by a route that I had not anticipated when I started the work.
Thank you. Jerry?
Well,
Unmute you.
One of my challenges in writing poems that rhyme is that sometimes I could be rhyming and find that I'm either forcing the rhyme, or if I'm not forcing it, suddenly the poem doesn't make any sense. So the challenge is to hold off rhyming too much and making sure it makes sense. And I'm part of a writing group that helps many times. I mean, they don't write it for me, but they'll say, this is great, except these two lines are sort of forced. And sometimes it's very subtle, the forcedness. Sometimes I can pick it up myself. Many times my wife will tell me, oh, that you're forcing it. Or I'll be going along, she'll say, oh, this is great. And then a forcedness will fit in. So that's quite a challenge because even though poems are short, it's really very hard to stay focused. I mean, it's a challenge, and that's why all my poems by both books have been one-word titles, and the title helps me to focus on what I'm writing, and hopefully it helps the reader focus on what the reader is hearing. And something unexpected was I didn't realize that I could actually be an inspiration, because one reader who acquired my book then came back and said, oh, I just wrote my own poem based on reading some of your poems. And then two other readers said, some of your poems have a hip hop beat to it. that I never expected. So that's the fun and the challenge of writing poetry.
Thank you, Jerry. So Edward, what's next for you as a writer? Are you working on anything else now?
Good question. I'm working on just been working on an old story and trying to fix it up. See just a short story. Actually, I'd like to try something. I'd like to try a historical novel myself. I haven't done yet. the fiction I've done so far is mostly the setting's been contemporary, and so that's something I would like to try. I haven't really settled on subject matter yet or a historical period yet.
Cassie, are you working on anything else now?
Yes, so I'm actually working on various stages of a couple of projects. So I'm working on a third Barnaby in the Barnaby series. I'm just finishing up the illustrations for my Perspective Detective sequel, and I also have another standalone children's book that I already have the manuscript completed, but I have to start with the illustration. So, and then I have a whole list of storylines that I'd like to tackle. I just have to find the time to do it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Mida? What's next?
So I'm finally working on the book 3. After 5 books in what's supposed to be a 3-book series, I still haven't written the book 3. So I know it doesn't make sense, but so I wrote book 1 was Boracay Vows, and then book 2 was Singapore Fling. But in between, I wrote a novella after Boracay Vows, which was the sequel, New York Engagement. And then I wrote book 2 finally. And before writing book 3, I wrote the prequel. And then, I wrote the prequel to the entire series, which is a short story. So I haven't gotten around to writing the entire book 3 because it's a novel. So it's the third couple. And so I'm going to sit down really during the NaNoWriMo. I'm trying to win it with the book 3, which is Samui Heat, which is set in Thailand. I lived there for 3 years, and Koh Samui was one of my favorite islands. It's in lots of beautiful islands in Thailand. That's where I chose to set it. So my hero is a chef. He's the third brother in the entire series, and then the heroine is she owns a travel adventure company in Thailand and in the Philippines, and so she goes back and forth between the two countries. So in this time frame that I'm writing it, they're both in the island at the same time. And so it's going to be filled with food, a lot of Thai, Filipino, and American, also fusion dishes that I'm still also concocting. So I'm doing that. I'm also writing the recipes for this dishes that I'm incorporating in the book, because I also hope to write a companion cookbook with all of this, because food is a huge part of the culture. In every location that I set my books in. So Filipino food, Singaporean, Malay, Indian dishes. So it's all about in my in my stories. They're all very tied up with my stories. So they're very much part of my series. So that's what's going to come next. So it's going to be, I know how it starts and how it ends. It's the soggy middle that's going to be worked out, and also how um in the in the course of things I'm going to incorporate all the cooking and eating and you know all the the diving and everything. So
Sounds good. Thank you. Lena, what's next on the horizon?
There is definitely a sequel in the wings for The Tea Merchant, but I'm not really focusing on that right now because we are about 6 weeks out from the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party. So what writing has really allowed me to do is actually become historian as well. So now I call myself writer, economist, historian. If you pick up the book, you'll see there's about 5 pages of references that I've had onto the end of the book. And those are just the materials that I've used. And when I'm writing historical novel books, you do tons and tons of research. So I've been giving a lot of public talks about the global links behind the Boston Tea Party. It all began at the Patrick Henry Library back in April, where I gave a talk. Most of it was nonfiction, and I spoke about my book a little bit as well. Last Monday, I spoke with the Boston Tea Party Ships Museum in Boston and also gave like an hour-long overview of the global links. So that's also, you know, we were talking about how people are interested in virtual events. That was also a virtual event. And I'm hoping to do more with the Fairfax Library and provide more of this historical angle, because I'm finding truth is actually stranger than fiction. You just have to go out and find it and listen to the story that comes out there from that.
Jerry, are you working on something new? Unmute yourself, Jerry.
Yes, first I have to unmute. Yeah, I'm working on a book about a feisty dog that I'm aiming to publish in 2024, maybe by February, March. And I'm also preparing for a talk in 2024 with Northern Virginia Community College's Lifetime Learning Institute. And I'll be giving another class on self-publishing with Ollie at George Mason in 2024. And there's a 4th book developing, all in poetry.
You're keeping yourself busy,
So
Jerry.
I'm keeping myself busy, right?
Henry,
I have completed the 3rd in a series of Occoquan-based mysteries. And in this 3rd book, the threat to the town is the political polarization that we're feeling across our country these days. And in order to get some historical insight and inspiration into how to handle this, I have written the book in such a way that the chapters alternate between Occoquan 1862 and Occoquan 2022. So it flips back and forth between the Civil War era and our contemporary era. And I've learned in the research I've done, much like Lena has done, that you know, truly history is stranger than fiction. And Occoquan was a particularly polarized town during the Civil War. It was, of course, a Southern town and seceded along with the rest of Virginia, but it was a town full of Quakers who were abolitionists. And so they did not want to secede. They were loyal to the Union. They were also pacifists, and so did not want to fight for either side. A little bit of historical trivia. In the election of 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was the Republican candidate for president, he received only 55 votes from all of Prince William County, Virginia, and all the votes came from Occoquan. So there's some rich history here, and I'm learning from this history about how we can negotiate some of the tensions that we are facing in our world today.
thank you. And since we are close to the hour, I was wondering if you all want to say something where people can buy your books from. Does it have to be from your website? Are you on Amazon? So let's start with you, Henry, since you're unmuted right now.
Yes, sure. All of the online book retailers carry my books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, an assortment of others as well. And I'm very pleased that they are both available to be borrowed from Fairfax County Public Library.
Jerry?
Yeah, my books, as I mentioned before, are also available for borrowing from the Fairfax County Library. But if anyone wants their own personal copy, you can buy it from my website at geraldmarkowitz.com, and I'll autograph it and include a free bookmark or two, and it's free delivery. And proceeds I donate to support Alzheimer's research and education.
you, Jerry. I see, Lena, you plugged in your Amazon link. Thank you.
Yeah,
for
I'm going into
saying
full
that.
marketing mode. So yeah, my books are on Amazon. It's available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. So Maida, if you're looking for someone to help you read your book, I can offer some tips there. It's also available at the Arlington County Public Library, the Fairfax County Public Library, and if you're ever in Boston, it's in the Boston Tea Party Ships Museum gift shop as well.
Thank you. Edward?
My book is also available online at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, and I believe there are maybe a couple of copies of it at Busboys and Poets in Arlington on the shelves if any of you are near Arlington. And other bookstores, you can order it, I guess, through pretty much any bookstore, I guess, and they will have it. I mean, they will get it in for you. But it's yeah, it's pretty easy to find online. Yeah.
Thank you. Cassie?
As Henry and Edward mentioned, my books, just like theirs, are also available on most major online retailers. So Amazon.com, Waterstones, Target, Walmart, obviously my website. Like Jerry said, if you want a personalized autographed one, you could go through my website, which is www.circletimebooks.com. I also have a YouTube storytelling channel geared towards children that's utilized in classrooms. And I say it's screen time without the guilt because it's educational and it's story time on one, while children who have a need these days for their iPads or devices. So I bring my stories as well as other author stories to other children's book authors to stories to life. And I use fun voices and do fun things with animations and sound effects. And that is www.youtube.com/@circletimebooks. So you can also get it visually there. And then I have them available on hardcover, paperback, and ebooks.
Maida?
Okay, so like everyone, my books are available wide. So Kobo, Amazon, Google Play, Apple, Barnes and Nobles, and they're also available from my website. So I have 5 paperbacks, and like Jerry and everyone, they're also available on my website for order for autograph copies with some swag and etc. So it's maidamalby.com, and the titles are Boracay Vows, New York Engagement, Singapore Fling, Pasko na My Love, and Forevermore.
And thank you, Edward, for putting your link in the chat, and Henry. Thank you. So before I close the session, I would like to ask any member from the audience who may have a question. Please feel free to unmute yourself or just put your question in the chat, whichever is easier. Hey. If you didn't write, what would you be doing? Who would like to take that? Henry?
Well, I am still a full-time pastor, and so if I were not exercising my creative muscles by writing these books, I would continue to be preaching and teaching. But what I've discovered in the course of this writing is that this storytelling enables me to deal with important issues in a way that I find I can't do as effectively as a preacher or a teacher. I think that most people do not want to be told what to do. People will say, don't preach at me, don't lecture me. We've all, had those experiences where, we just don't want to hear people coming on too strong with a message. And storytelling is a way of bringing people into the lives of characters in a way that gets them to think about things in a new way. And of course, storytelling for religious leaders is nothing new. Jesus was a great teller of parables. Jewish rabbis were always great storytellers. And so I enjoy this work I'm doing as a kind of an adjunct to my day-to-day life. And I find the two work very well together.
Yes,
Then-
I'd add on to that as well. So my full-time job is an economist, and whether you're an economist or a writer, you're kind of after the same thing, trying to understand why people do what they do. One's with numbers, one's with imagination. But I do find the two complement each other. And if I weren't doing this, I don't think I would be able to find a hobby as fulfilling like this. I might turn into a gym rat or someone with no personality instead. So it's definitely the best way to go, and you can accomplish a lot just little by little every day.
Thank you. It's time to call it a night. So I'd like to thank you all for sharing your journey with us. And thank you to everyone who's here participating and sharing your evening with us. Till we meet next time. Good night, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you for
Night.
having us.
Thank you.